Sheng. Free reed music instruments have been known in Asia for more than 3,000 years. But they were almost unknown in Europe until the 17th century. Who were the first to bring free reed instruments from Asia to Europe? The first documented evidence of a free reed instrument from Asia in Europe dates back to 1636. Unproven claims are: the free reed instruments were known in ancient Greece via the Silk Road and then came to Europe. Unproven claims are: Marco Polo brought free reed instruments to Europe in the 13th century. Unproven claims are: Michael Praetorius described in Syntagma Musicum a free reed technique as it is used in the Asian instruments. That's our unproven claims, so let's stay to the sources from 1636 that are verifiable. The drawing is from the book Harmonie universelle by Marin Marsenne. Marsenne thinks that this instrument comes from India. He said the instrument is from Sir Claude Manetry. Marsenne suspects that the pipes may be similar to those of the Western chalumeau flute, but also expresses his skepticism about this theory. He thinks that the instrument can be played with a skin similar to a musette. The free reeds of the Indian instrument were not recognized. As the instrument was incomplete, its functionality was probably not analyzed or tested. Harmonie universelle lists all the other reed techniques known in Europe at the time: single reed pipes, double reed pipes. Even a mouth organ is described, which works also with a free reed technology. The drawing shows a Khaen, played in Laos, Thailand, Vietnam and Cambodia. Works with free reed technology. A national symbol of Laos. 1674. Another example of a Khaen is documented in the inventory list of the Royal Danish Kunstkammer, described as an Indian organ made of cane. These two Indian instruments, which actually came from Laos and are called Khaen, were not recognized as free reed instruments and were forgotten. Almost 100 years later, the first Sheng-like instrument appeared in Europe. Tam Kim. To see in the book Gabinetto Armonico. The description indicates that the instrument comes from China. The description indicates that the Sheng was possibly already known in Europe at that time. However, the drawing and description also indicates that the illustrator have never seen a Sheng themselves. Flute organ pipes were drawn instead of the free reed pipes. There were probably only a few people who had actually seen a Sheng themselves in Europe. But there were probably already Sheng variants in Europe at that time. Even if not technically correct, this Tam Kim is possibly the oldest illustration of a Sheng in Europe. But maybe Tam Kim is an independent instrument that has not yet become known. Shortly afterwards, The next curious Sheng variant appears. Synenfeme organum. From the book, De Tribus Generibus Instrumentorum. Like the Tam Kim, this instrument was probably intended to be a Chinese Sheng organ. Again, the publishers probably only had second-hand information. In the description you can read, brought to Europe from China, by Philippus Fucket in 1685. A sound is produced by squeezing. This instrument appears once again in 1751, in a French encyclopedia. Probably an attempt to illustrate the Sheng without having seen the instrument itself, or actually an instrument in its own right. 1770, St. Petersburg. Musical News and Notes. This magazine reports on a Sheng player at the Russian court in St. Petersburg. The magazine writes, "This sensible artist has also learned to play the lovely Chinese organ." Johann Wilde played the Sheng, the lovely Chinese organ, at the court of St. Petersburg. The mode of operation and design of the Sheng are described very well, but no reference is made to the free reed technology. It is said that Johann Wilde's Sheng was studied, and therefore installed a free reed technique in the first speaking machine in 1780. Learn more about the first speaking machines in another part of the Sheng series. Until this time, information about the Sheng continued to appear. There were probably already Sheng instruments in Europe, but none of these sources could clearly explain the functionality or design of a Sheng instrument. Until 1779. A French Jesuit made his way to China and sent the first detailed information about the Sheng to Europe.
JosephMarieAmiot.
签得名
Amiot was a Jesuit priest who set off from Lorient, France in 1749, on a foreign mission to China. He reached Macau in 1750. In 1751 he traveled on to Peking. Amiot came to the court of Emperor Qianlong. In the Forbidden City, he worked as an astronomer and researcher. He studied the Chinese language and called himself
签得名
The Society of Jesus, which had sent him to China, was dissolved in Europe in 1762, and then also in China in 1775. Amiot continued to work on translations of Chinese literature into French. He stayed in Beijing. One of his works was published in France in 1779.
Mémoire sur la musique des Chinois.
In this book, we find what is probably the first detailed and accurate description of a Sheng that is obtainable in Europe. Amiot described the history and mythology of the Sheng. He explained how the free reed works and how the pipes act as a resonator. Amiot wrote that there were different scholars' opinions about the instrument. He sends two variants of Sheng in double to France, to minister and friend Henry Burton. Amiot knew exactly how and why a Sheng was built, and how the free reed technique of the Sheng worked. Amiot was the last survivor of the Jesuit mission in China. He died in 1793 in Peking, and was buried in the Jesuit cemetery in Peking. Thanks to JosephMarieAmiot, now for the first time, a complete description of the Sheng technique was available in Europe. And there were 4 Sheng organs for study. In 1780,
Jean, Benjamin, de la Borde.
illustrate in his book,
Essai sur la musique, ancienne et moderne.
3 Sheng variants, as described by Amiot. Laborde's book illustrates 2 more variants of the Sheng.
Sheng espèce d'orgue chinoise. Espèce de trompette chinoise. Espèce de trompette chinoise.
We already know a similar variant from this instrument, as Tam Kim by Filippo Bonanni from 1723. In Laborde's book you will find different Sheng variants that have already been published visually or in writing in other books. Johann Wilde and JosephMarieAmiot were the rare ones who actually knew about the free reed technique of the Sheng. These 2 are always mentioned. But even before Johann Wilde, JosephMarieAmiot, and Jean-Benjamin de Laborde, Moyriac de Mailla reported on the Sheng of the Chinese.
Joseph Anne-Marie de Moyriac de Mailla.
Chinese name Fengbing. Sent to China as a missionary in 1701. Learn the Chinese script and language. He reached the rank of Mandarin. He translates into French, completed in 1730, and sends it to France in 1737. This translation remains in the library for 30 years, because the publisher died. Published posthumously in 1777 as
Histoire générale de la Chine, ou Annales de cet empire, traduit du Tonghien Kang Mu par de Mailla.
In Tome Premier you can see 3 different variants of a Sheng. The instrument is briefly described. There is no reference to free reed technology in the pipes. Although some significant details are missing, it is a very good description of the Sheng. Long before Amiot and Laborde, he gives a deep insight into the musical history and mythology of Chinese culture. However, it was published much later than he wrote it. Buried with a funeral service in Beijing, at the expense of Emperor Qianlong. Qianlong then also supported Amiot, after the Jesuit order was dissolved in China. Until the 17th century, Asian free reed instruments were almost unknown in Europe. In the 17th and 18th centuries the first variants arrived in Europe. The arrival of these Asian free reed instruments in Europe probably led to the development of new free reed techniques. This new free reed techniques inspired instrument makers in Europe to create many new instruments, like the harmonica, the accordion, the concertina, the harmonium, or the melodica. Whether at all or how big the influence of the Sheng was on these new instruments in Europe you can learn in the next parts of the Sheng series. In 1780, in a description of the first speaking machine, the so-called first free-reed instrument developed in Europe, appears. Many sources cite this speaking machine as the origin of the European free-reed story. We will find out if this is true or not in the next Sheng series Patris.
Sheng